new path today, going up to Lovell Hill Pools, and I have no idea which way to go, so this should be interesting. So it's a bit of a grey day today, not too bad for a walk though. Just finding some new places to visit, thinking of things to talk about. Just going to try and let it happen as much as possible. So the last time I was out, I was talking about some trains of thought about what depression is and ways to identify that, and some potentially helpful ways of viewing it, that it's not ultimately who you are, more of an experiencing of something in your life which might be informing you something is perhaps broken or not developed, and there's always hope with that, because you can learn new things, new ideas, if we can at least silence our inner critic, or bring the volume down on the voice that you should know the answer to certain things. I know that's been a feature of my past and in my recovery, not needing to know everything. I can learn new things. And today I thought about introducing some of the concepts that I use and work with clients around feelings, particularly anger and frustration, and perhaps ways to make friends with those feelings, or at least become a little bit more familiar with them, and to be able to have conversations internally about what our options are to deal with them. So one of the things that helped me whilst I was training to be a counsellor was an approach called Transactional Analysis. Well, Transactional Analysis was an approach thought up by a guy called Eric Byrne, and it's based on interactions between people, and it's based on the principle that we receive a stimulus from the external world, and then we have a response. And it's based on the idea that we all need to have that sense of stimulus and response, and because it meets our need for attention and recognition. I won't go into too much depth again. I don't want it to be a psychology lesson. What I found helpful was the model, the part of the model which involves the parent, the adult and the child. I found that the parent, adult and child model works really well when trying to identify feelings and where they're coming from, and also a sense of who might be in control at any point. It's a bit like having an internal family inside you. You kind of want to take over. And a way of thinking about this, parent, adult and child, is if you imagine you are a vehicle being driven down a road, and behind the wheel of the car, the vehicle that is you, there are three characters, shall we say: parent, adult and child. Imagine they're all sat in one of those old bench seats you see in the American cars from the 50s. And as you're going down the road and experiencing life and trying to navigate the road, any one of those parent, adult and child are clambering for control of the steering wheel. So a child might want to head off to the sweet shop. The parent cuts in and says, no, you're not doing that. You need to be doing your homework, or you need to be living healthier. You need to eat your greens. And if that continues, there tends to be a toing and froing, and the car then is at risk of veering out of control. And that's what we can experience when we suddenly become aware of feelings like you're being disadvantaged, frustration, anger, all those kind of feelings that we might experience as being uncomfortable, and we want to let out, but sometimes it's difficult because sometimes the ways that we taught to deal with those, or the way we've adapted to deal with those, doesn't exactly serve as well as adults. So what do? So the first thing I learnt to do is put the brakes on, and that's where the adult comes in, being able to just apply the brakes and stop. Yeah, so back to the idea of the parent, adult and child. The parent, adult and child resides within us all. This is my understanding. And they're constantly at play or in conflict or trying to help in a way. And we can sometimes get caught in a conflict between certain aspects of the parent and certain aspects of the child, as you can probably imagine, which is how we experience life as we grow up. and we can take meanings from those experiences. I'm going to cut to the chase with some of the feelings that we can find difficult from time to time. Usually the ones that we class as negative, the anger, frustration, annoyance, those ones that we might hate ourselves for having, but actually, as I said before, they are just feelings, and how we process them and what we do with them is the task at hand. And I'm going to I'll take the child first. When I talk about the child, I'm talking about this psychological position we hold in ourselves and where our feelings might be coming from. So if you imagine a traffic light, and in the red one you put parent, in the amber one you put adult, and in the green one you put child. I don't want you to associate the colours with those positions. They don't mean the parent isn't necessarily dangerous and red means danger, I think, universally. But just one above the other, just so that we can use that as an idea of how to reference it. So, taking the child aspect of the parent-child model, if we split that into two sections, we have the adaptive child and we have a free child. And the adaptive child, first of all, if we look at that, you could be forgiven to think that adaptive, does it have a positive or a negative connotation? And the truth of the matter is, it has both a positive and a negative influence on how we are in the world. So adaptive, in a positive sense, is meaning being able to adapt to situations, to grow, to learn. And so the positive adaptive child is what I tend to call the little professor. Whenever you've found yourself playing with Lego as a kid, or doing a jigsaw on your own, quite happy in your own space, making it up as you go along. And that was what I would associate to be the positive adaptive child. And then we have the negative adaptive child. And so the characteristics of the negative adaptive child is the one that tends to try to manipulate situations or people, or has inappropriate behaviour as an adult. So, I don't know, one of the classic examples I learned from was like belching at the dinner table in a restaurant, for example. As a child, you might be tempted to try that out. As an adult, you might also be tempted to try it out. But it's greeted in a different way by the people around you, so there's some social acceptability connected to the way that part of you works. And we learn those things, or we don't learn those things, and we continue through life using those strategies to try and influence our environment, the people around us, and what we sow, we reap. So let's take a minute to consider the free child. Free in itself sounds like an ideal place to be, free from pain, free from anger, free from thought, free from existence. However, what we're talking about when we talk about the free child, if we talk about the positive free child, we're talking about the part of us that's able to express feelings in a healthy way, and is able to contact those feelings which are appropriate to the situation. If we're happy, we might laugh and joke, smile. If we're sad, we might cry. If we're hurt, also we might cry. So there are various different feelings that we'll be experiencing, and it's about being able to allow the person that you are, the adult, to experience those, whether or not it's a loss of somebody. I know that it's difficult sometimes for men to come to terms with the fact that they are human and they do cry and are allowed to cry, but for some reason it doesn't work sometimes. And so rather than feel those, if you want to call them painful or uncomfortable feelings, behaviours kick in to avoid feeling those natural, universal feelings, and then that results in behavioural issues or ways of behaving that aren't necessarily conducive for growth. And that leaves us with the negative free child, what I like to call a 70 and a 30. Can you drive 70 miles an hour in a 30 zone on UK roads? And usually the response is, well, not really. But when you think about it, you can. You could drive 70 miles an hour down a high street. It's impulsive, it's risky, you can do it. But for the best part, we restrict ourselves from doing that. And that's the point. It's like, why do we do that? What is governing that? And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. With the 17 or 30, if you think of that as impulsive behaviour, remember, the child is the one that kind of brings forth feelings that we're expressing. And if you get angry and you're driving, it's right, I'll put my foot down. So it's at the cost. It's a cost to the self, and it's done regardless of how anyone else might feel. So there's no real appreciation of those around, and therefore the ways that we or you have coped with life up to this point, when difficult feelings come along, imagine that steering wheel getting pulled totally in a different direction to the way you want to be going, and suddenly you can wake up in life thinking, how the hell did I end up here? What went wrong? And so I'm hoping this gives you a little bit of an idea of how the child informs our behaviours. I'm no different. I experience this. I can feel my child sometimes. And actually with the friends that I have at the moment, we often say, sounds like you and your child right now. My daughter says it about me. You and your child there, Dad. And just for that minute, just for that moment, it creates a pause. The brakes being applied just allow us for a little self-reflection on what I'm experiencing. And I can wonder, how did I end up going down this road? Who was in charge? How can I change that? And that is the basis of a lot of behavioural change for me. There are lots of theories out there based on it that are all equally as good. This is just me sharing a little bit of like what's helped me. So I'm just quickly going to go through the parental aspects of the parent, adult and child model. And the way I like to look at this is we have a controlling parent on one side and a nurturing parent on the other side. And the idea of controlling parent has to some extent a negative connotation, I guess. And to some extent that would be true. But actually, There's a positive and negative side to both sides of the controlling parent and the nurturing parent. Let's go for the controlling parent first. Some people call it the critical parent. And if we think about the positive aspects of the controlling parent, a good way to look at this is if a doctor was concerned about your weight, or your drinking, or smoking, they might say, I'm a little concerned about your drinking, or your smoking, or your weight. Have you thought about doing anything about it? And you might not have thought of anything about it, but you also might be quite happy with that. But what he's doing is, or she is doing, is giving you a chance to consider, giving you information. Then the choice is yours. If we think of the negative critical parent or controlling parent, I always call it the waggy finger. You should have done this, you should have known that, you should have, or you are stupid, why do you make mistakes, why did I do that? And so it can be quite strong in the messages, and that can relate to how we experienced our parents as children. So it's telling us a little bit more about how our identity works and how we identify with that identity if we're suddenly thinking we're not good enough or it has to be perfect. This is usually because that critical parent has, the negative critical parent has quite a strong voice, and we can detect it by the words that we use. You are, I should have, etc, etc. And so, not the last part, but the next part I want to describe is the nurturing parent, which on the face of it sounds really nice, positive. Can't be anything bad about the nurturing parent, surely. It's nurturing, isn't it? Now, the thing about the nurturing parent is, on the positive side, we have, I always explain this with an example. If I had a computer problem and I needed help with that, I would ask somebody to come over and help. And if that person sat with that computer and just clicked all the buttons and then left, what I've learned is that the next time I have a problem, I can ask that person and they'll come and fix it for me. But I've learned nothing in the process of that interaction. What really is ideal in that situation is the positive nurturing parent is the one that says, if you need me, just ask. So it gives power back to the person who's experiencing the issue. It's not a case of jumping in, fixing and leaving. The downside, if you want to call it a downside, is that it takes effort to sit with someone and actually explain the process of what you're doing, then give them time to experience it and do it. And there is an adage that we only learn by doing, and I would agree with that. So how can the nurturing parent have a negative side? I simply refer to this one as the smother mother. Not indicating that it's anything to do with the female of the species, but it's that idea that rather than allowing you to forge forwards and make mistakes and learn from mistakes, it keeps the child protected, free from harm, and not experiencing things that would help build resilience, help them grow, help them learn, help them to understand their realities. And if that continues in later life, things like the death of a parent can send people into an absolute spiral, because the primary caregiver, the problem solver, the person that helped at times of need is no longer there, leaving the person with no idea of resources to cope. But they can, if they get help and if they start to understand the path that's brought them to where they are. And at that point they can start to build new resources new ways of coping, gradually, slowly, building up over a shorter period of time compared to the time it took them to get to where they are. Last but not least is the adult, the one in the driving seat that's kind of watching all this stuff going on, wondering where the hell are we going with this? Wish these two would stop arguing, stop grabbing the wheel. And this is where mindfulness comes in for me. It's about applying the brakes. As I said earlier, let's hit the brakes. So, hitting the brakes for me is creating the space between the thinking and the doing mind. Simply put, the adult is the one that has reality tested the theories that are put forward by adults around them, by parents, teachers, and other people that want to keep you safe. So certain things will be helpful, like I was just saying there before my gimbal died. So certain things will be helpful. Messages that are given to us to protect us. Stop, look and listen before you cross the road is a key one. If you touch something that's hot when you're a child and it burns you, do you need to go back and try it again to test it out? I don't think so. That's my point. The adult doesn't need to test it out anymore. It knows that this is not a good thing to do, and so doesn't do it purposely. And now the whole aim of this model is to kind of start to, but actually start to put into the adult what you've learnt from your experiences of life. Who's in charge? Who's trying to take over control? What the feelings are, where they come from, and learning new ways of being able to express feelings rather than acting out the feelings towards somebody or holding on to them and letting them dwell inside and build up and create depression and anxiety. So it's a model, a roadway, a roadmap for the mind to be able to work through identifying which ego state you are at any point. So my child kicked in there. I'm probably actually my critical parent because the battery died on the gimbal. Should have charged that. I should have charged the gimbal. Yep, no doubt. Doesn't stop me filming. So it's a momentary capture of the message that I'm getting from myself and going, yep, but it's okay. Nobody died. Nobody's injured. In the grand scheme of things, I'm going to adapt. So my adaptive child kicks in and says, hey, just hold it a little differently. Just try and make it a little bit steadier. It doesn't have to be perfect. There is no such thing. And whilst I am trying to work towards better quality video, better quality content, working on me particularly in learning these skills and putting things into practice, this is all part and parcel, which is inside me right now, of the parent, adult and child conversation taking place. And I've decided that holding it this way is absolutely fine. It's okay talking to yourself. There are people watching these videos. And not to lose hope. There's probably more I could have said. I've talked quite a lot now. So just things for you to think about as I take a road home. And I think I have to go grocery shopping. So you can imagine where my free child is right now. I don't want to do that. So any time you feel like you're an adult with a tantrum, it's that free child. Think about how you can soothe it. What's the purpose? I'm going to go shopping today. I'm going to get food. I'm going to be able to enjoy a nice meal later on. Sounds like a good reason to go. So until next time, thanks for joining me on this walk and talk. Hope it's beneficial. Feel free to leave any comments in the bottom below the video. I'll try not to let my critical parent out to any kind of constructive feedback you have. So until next time, stay safe, be well, and keep on keeping on.